So we are going to solve this by completing the square. When you complete the square, you do not want this 5 on this side, you want it on the other side. So we'll subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. When we do that, that makes the 5 be a negative 5 on the other side. Also, when you complete the square, you do not want a 2 in front of x squared. We want just plain x squared. So we'll go ahead and divide both sides of the equation by 2. That divides each term by 2. So we have now x squared minus 4x equals negative 5 halves. You can write negative 2.5. Fractions are okay. The fractions are always exact. Decimals are exact as long as you don't have to round them off. So negative 2.5 does not have to be rounded off, and if you prefer that, you can. I'll keep using fractions though because they're a little trickier for students, and there are problems where you have to keep the fractions to avoid rounding off. The next thing to do is to take a look at this negative 4, the number in front of the x. We memorize the steps that help us complete the square, and the steps are to take 1/2 times that negative 4 and square that. Or if you're using a calculator, negative 4 divided by 2 squared. But again, you need to get an exact value, and that may mean a fraction. In this case, 1/2 times negative 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. So 4 is the number that we need to add to both sides of this equation. So on the left side, you've completed the square. You now have a trinomial that factors. It factors as x minus 2 times x minus 2. So by completing the square, we mean filling in this number on both sides of the equation, 4, that allows us to write a binomial squared. On the right-hand side, we need to get a common denominator. So let's take the negative 5 halves and multiply it by 2 halves. No, I guess the 5 halves is fine. Okay, so leave the negative 5 halves, but take the 4 and think of it as a 4 over 1. Multiply it by 2 halves so that we get a common denominator of 2. So the left side is all set. It's x minus 2 squared. The right side now is negative 5 halves plus 8 halves, which is 3 halves. So we've completed the square. We have the correct fraction on the right. We are ready to take the square root of both sides of the equation. So as we introduce the square root symbol to both sides, we include a plus or minus sign on the number side. So that gives us both answers, because there's 2 answers here and we don't want to miss one. So we have the square root of 3 in the numerator and the square root of 2 in the denominator. We should rationalize the denominator, so we'll multiply the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 2. So we have x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 6 over 2. We're almost done. We just have to add 2 to both sides of the equation. So we have 2 plus or minus the square root of 6 divided by 2 for your answer. Now in WebAssign, you would enter that as 2 plus the square root of 6 divided by 2, comma 2 minus the square root of 6 divided by 2.